Well, hello, friends. I'm so excited because I have a friend here that I have just loved just spending time with her. We worked on some projects, which you'll be talking about. So, Sherri Seligson is here. And, Sherri, I'm so excited that you're here. I cannot wait to talk to you about all the things. But first, why don't we just start by you just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hi, Tricia. Thanks for having me. So I am a marine biologist and worked at Walt Disney World's Living Seas for many years. I was in charge of their predators. So that was the
Ooh,
sharks and the
the
larger
scary
animals.
things.
Yes, the care and the feeding. I did research on shark behavior while I was there. And then we had our first child, and I considered that a promotion. I really felt like God was calling me to be home with our kids. So I came home, and we have four children. And at during that season, we really felt like God was calling us to homeschool. So as I wasn't weird enough to leave
To be a yeah,
to
scientist.
to then now become a homeschool mom, which absolutely was a wonderful experience. I loved it. All of our kids were homeschooled through high school and now grown, and it was a great experience. And I wrestled with that because everybody was around me. All my coworkers were shocked that I left that career, and I was wondering, was I putting my career on the side and putting it away?
Mhm.
What was really interesting was to see how that was God's plan for me, and he used those experiences to get me to what I'm doing today. So, for example, working at Disney, before I even worked at the Living Seas, I worked on the rides, and that was where you have to corral people and in lines and get them to two to a seat. And I used to be able to say two to a seat in six different languages. You could tell group was coming, and just get them in order, and had to stand up and on top of things so people could see me. And so my speaking in public began to be very comfortable
Mm.
because I had to. And who knew that today I would be speaking in groups and conferences. And then as a homeschool mom, I had to teach all of my children. And this, that we don't, as if we don't know something, we learn it along with our kids.
Mhm.
I had a very, very poor writing education. I went to four different middle schools, and that season is when you're learning composition skills and writing skills. And I just really didn't get a lot of that. And so I learned how to write with each one of my children as they learned how to write. And again, God was preparing in me the skills that I needed to do what I do today as a writer and a speaker. So I write curriculum, creation based curriculum with Apology Educational Ministries. I've written several of their courses. And then I also film instructional videos to accompany all of their science courses for middle school and high school. So we go all over the world and we film science in action, and we help people to see God's fingerprints in creation, making it much more entertaining and educational as well, to make it come alive for students. And so it's just been a blessing to have the perspective to look back and see how God used his plan A for my
Mhm.
life. What I thought was very convoluted was really a direct path to get me to the station that I am today, to be able to do this. And who knows what I'll do in the next season. But in this season, I'm writing. I love the faith and the science component. I love seeing God's fingerprints through his word, through his creation. And then, of course, as you and I met and got to know each other better, we realized that we had this great blending of our skills and heart and ability to be able to write a faith and science reading book and potentially series. It's just been so fun to see how God has utilized those things in my life to get me to what I'm doing today, which is so fun.
And I love it, and I love how, like, your training, prepared you to homeschool, which
Yes.
we didn't even think about, and then also homeschool prepared you for the next step in your life. And I think definitely as a homeschool mom, we do I learned way more teaching my kids than I remember learning through my education.
That's right.
And we like this morning, I'm reading about William Penn and the Royalists and the Puritans, and that William Penn started Pennsylvania and why they, but then now it's like we're reading a biography about him together, and I'm like learning, like, oh, that's why. It's like I'm still learning.
We never stop. And I
We
think
never
that's another
stop.
thing too,
Yeah.
whether you're homeschooling or not even, and even if you're completed with your homeschooling assignments with your kids, we can continue to learn. We can continue to read and explore and discover because our brain is always needing that engagement. It's so important because God will use us in every season of our life for something. And so it is. It's just so fun to learn with that kind of perspective rather than I've got to learn for a test coming up so I can get an A, so that I can succeed, so I can do this and all the pressure. But just to learn to love, to learn about it is so fun.
Yeah, and I also love how, you talk about, okay, homeschooling and just that season of your life, your kids are grown now, and you're like, I just enjoyed it. But then I'm like, Sherry, let's get a little bit real here. Did you enjoy every day? Were there some
Absolutely.
hard moments? Because I know there might be some homeschool moms or moms in general that are listening that are like, oh, her kids were perfect and it must have been easy. So
Yeah.
I mean, looking back now, it's funny with my older kids that are 35, 32, and 30. I'm like, you guys were so easy. Like, you never got in trouble. They're like, Mom, what are you talking about? Because it's like you kind of forget the hard stuff
You
and just
do.
remember the good stuff.
You do. I mean, it's always that way though too. It was the best, hardest thing I've ever done, and there were days when I just didn't even want to think about opening that math book one more time, or reading that next storyline with whatever assignment they needed to have done. It was for their good, but it's the same thing as a mom. You're making another meal. They have to eat every day, and
I know.
and so thinking of what they need to have and making sure you've got your grocery list, and again, and then throw in another load of laundry and throw in all of those things. That's the longer road, but it's the means to get through the
Mhm,
amazing fun parts of enjoyable parts. It's and actually fun in itself. I mean, those trials, those challenges, they build character in us. I mean, I can't tell you how much I was on my knees
mhm.
asking the Lord to just get me through today. And I was calling out to him, and I was relying on him, and it helped me learn, okay, what is the most important thing of today? What should we be doing today? What's critical? My heart with the Lord, my relationship with my kids, their relationship with each other and with the Lord, just enabling me to boil that down to say, okay, math doesn't have to be done today. We're going to focus on the important right now, and this is gaining our kids' hearts, or helping them to understand how to live with one another well and to love one another well. Those were hard, but
Mhm.
what a blessing to be able to have done that. And standing on the other side of that, you have older kids, standing on the other side of that season with your older kids, you can look back and go, I'm glad I did that. I don't know that I want to go through that part all over again, but what a blessing it is to be on the other side. I mean, it was hard, but anything worthwhile is hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
energy, it's effort, it's long suffering. Boy, that word really really meant a lot to me. This I'm like long suffering. What a what a word that is, just descriptive of many of those days. But then there were those days where we would just sit and cuddle on the couch and read, or
Mm,
we would quietly just be talking about doing something, and one of them would bring up a subject and ask a hard question, and we could just sit down and have the conversation. We had the time to do that. We had the relationship set up to where they felt like they could ask those hard questions. And we could work through those things together rather than us just driving all over the world, getting here, going there, just ignoring the real part of it,
mhm.
the relationship part, and doing all the externals. So I treasure those times. But yeah, it was definitely intense, and it was hard, and it was not glamorous whatsoever, but God used those things for me. He
Yes.
used them for me, not just for our kids. So I'm so grateful to have experienced that.
Absolutely. I think they talk about long suffering and patience, all the things we don't want to learn, caring for others, learning to control your tongue, learning to apologize and seek forgiveness from your kids, like all the things that we are learning in the process. It is definite character building. But I
Yeah.
think another thing that really impacted me and that you can speak into is, growing up, going to a public school and learning about evolution, learning about millions of years, and it's just taught. And I just remember I'd go to church and hear one thing, and then go to school, and I'd be so confused. And within the first year that John and I were married, we went to Answers in Genesis conference, and I just remember like, oh, it can make sense But then as I'm teaching and learning science and getting great materials and learning more and discovering like this couldn't have evolved. Like the complex systems. We just dissected a sheep's eyeball for homeschool just 20 minutes before I jumped on this video with you, Sherry. And I'm looking at this complex eyeball from a sheep. And
Yeah.
there it's just amazing. But the more I taught my kids, I learned about God's creation and God's just the amazing world that we live in. I got to enjoy it. Like again, like you were saying, it
Mhm.
wasn't just learning for a test. And in homeschool, we don't do a lot of tests. We do a lot of learning. We get excited about learning. We get excited. There are some tests, but we
Yeah,
just
yeah,
get
well,
excited about subjects and all those things. And I've learned along with it. And I will say we've done your marine biology. And it's so fun to hear my kids in the other room watching the video, and I could hear your voice talking about something. I'm like, "Hey, Sherry, how's it going?" Oh, um,
yeah.
but yeah, even before I knew you did that, I didn't make the connection until like, "Oh wait, that's Sherry. Okay, Sherry."
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned how you heard evolution, evolution in one area, and creation, creation at church, and that wrestling of what to do with those two. When I was in college, I was a young Christian in college, a new Christian, and I was a pre med major at a secular college. And one of the classes we were required to take was called evolution. That's the title of the
Mm,
course. The textbook was Darwin's Origin of Species, which is
mm,
the book that Charles Darwin wrote that kind of set the stage for this theory of evolution. And the first day in class, I'll never forget this. The professor said, "Besides the Bible, what's the one book that has changed the way that man thinks about the world?" And I was like, I raised my hand. What you're saying besides number 1, what's number 1? You're basically pulling off number 1 so that number 2 could be no. I'm like, "So the Bible influences how we think, right?" And he goes, "Well, we're not gonna talk about that. That's totally different subject." But it's not. And that started me on my apologetic journey to see how,
wow.
God gave us a revelation in his word, but he gave us a revelation of himself in his creation. And so we can see his creation. We are called to study his creation because the more we see about that, learn about the creation, the more we magnify him, the more we give him glory. It brings him glory. So when we see complexity, when we see evidence of design, which is
Yes,
everywhere, then
everywhere.
we just praise the Lord. It magnifies. When he spoke these things into being, he spoke that complexity into being. He spoke even that sheep's eye, boom, into being and how it worked. And so we shouldn't be afraid as Christians to study our world. In fact, we should be the ones who are leading the way,
Mhm.
because the more we learn about it, the more we learn about the magnificence of God, and the more we can see his hand and lessons in creation for us too. So I love talking about that. That. And so
Yeah.
but that was kind of my journey of getting into apologetics. Why do I believe? What do I believe? And if we don't talk about that with our kids um, in the Christian world, they're going to get all this evolutionary thinking from people just speaking of it as fact without supporting a lot of it, because there's
Mhm,
not a
mhm,
lot of support, believe it or
mhm.
not. But they're going to be stating it as fact, and then they go to church on Sunday morning and they hear God created the world, and that's the only time they hear it. So what do they do with that? They don't know what to do with that. And so you're getting so many kids who have these crises of belief, because how can everything have come about without a God? If that's what these scientists are saying, then where's God in all this? How does he fit in all this? And it really diminishes his power if we say evolution happened,
Yeah.
because he spoke it into being. He didn't have to use this long process of billions of years. So again, it's important to discuss with our kids, to have them exposed to good teaching, sound teaching of science, but with a creation worldview that helps equip them to be able to stand for what they believe.
Yeah, and it just really settled my heart. It like took away those kind of doubts that were hanging out in the back of my mind. And then I could just really fully dig into God's word, dig into faith. And it also, like the Bible talks a lot, consider the ant. I mean, God says, like, look at creation, look at
That's
what,
right.
look at the heavens.
That's right.
All the things that are there. So God's telling us to look at creation, like you said, it reflects His glory.
Yes.
But then, if we apply that and fully can just trust that God's word is true, there's not the science that has the facts, and then the Bible something different. It just really I was able to grow in my faith because
Mm,
I just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I got it, and I'm just digging into God's word. It made
that's
all the
amazing.
difference. And
That's
so I
awesome.
remember, Sherry, I mean, I saw you again at conferences here and there. Like we, as speakers, we kind of passed by and we,
Right.
hey, hi,
Right, right,
like,
right.
oh, hey, who are you? I don't know. Where are you? Oh, apology. Okay, whatever we're doing. But then we were able to go to an event where we all got to hear each other's talks, which was awesome in a very small environment. And I think the first thing I said to you after you were done and you were just talking about, I don't even remember. I literally don't even remember what your talk was about. But I
Yeah, I
just
don't
remember
remember
I
either.
like her. I think she's great. I love her
Aw.
personality and the way she explains sciencey stuff. And I walked up, I'm like, I think I want to write a book with you or something. It
Oh,
was
you're
something like
welcome.
that. And you were like,
No, it was
who's this?
awesome. It was
Yeah, who's this
great.
person? And so, but when we sat down, I mean, talk about 101 ideas of different things we can do when we talk about stories and science. But Sherry, you were the one that kind of brought up like telling a story, like a science story, using like a true science facts, but maybe make up a fictional creature and follow the lifestyle. So talk a little about that idea, and then we'll talk about where that led us.
Yes. Yeah. So I think one of the things that got me excited about the possibility of writing like this kind of genre was I love historical fiction. You write historical fiction. You write amazing stories that are set in different time periods and you do a whole ton of research to make sure that the time period what the setting is occurring in is accurate and the things that happen. And so one of the great things about historical fiction is you come away from that story with a better understanding of that time period
Right.
because it's told in a story. So you're getting these images in your head and you remember better. And I thought, what a great way to teach because we are wired to be um, for stories. We're wired for stories. You know, Jesus taught in stories. That's how we
Mhm.
remember better. And so stories are a great method of education and of teaching and getting information out and more engaging, obviously more fun. So I thought like a scientific story, not science fiction, but scientific fiction instead of
Yeah.
historical fiction. So telling a story, and there's a couple of books that were out there that I had read with my kids that I just fell in love with that were kind of like that. They were fiction, but there was so much scientific fact information in there that was just a natural part of the story that in following the story of whatever you were reading about you were learning, but you didn't know you were learning. You were just engaged in the story. And so you knew in the same way that, you know, in World War II, and you're reading about this, and there were certain I don't know, vehicles available during those days that aren't available now. And you just have that in your mind because
Yeah.
you're reading about it. It's the same thing with these stories. And so I really feel like that's a wonderful medium to to teach kids, to excite kids, to share about some of these amazing creatures that are out there, but in a way that's engaging, entertaining, and enjoyable for I'm finding for not just kids, but this book, we're getting a lot of adults that are reading this before their kids
Yeah.
even get it, which has been fun. Because again, we're wired for stories. Stories are
Yes.
fun, and so that brought us to in our discussions about what we could do. This book that is new that we both wrote,
Yeah.
Wonders of
That
the
we're
Ocean
so
Realm.
proud of. I just love the way it turned out.
I know, I know. It's a beautifully illustrated. I mean, even the embossed bubbles on the front
I
cover are
know.
just so fun. And then another one of my favorites. I mean, this is not even story related, but it is. We highlight 5 animals and each animal lives at a specific depth in the ocean. And so this table of contents takes you down into the depths as you learn about each of the animals we're highlighting. And so it is engaging, it's educational, but you don't know you're learning. You're just reading it and enjoying. And these animals that we chose are animals that are kind of unique, not your standard ocean animal that most people will write about in ocean books. So it just makes it fascinating because every animal in creation is fascinating. Yeah.
Yes. So we have Astrid, the multicolor sea star, Maximus, the peacock mantis shrimp, Dexter, the mimic octopus, Wendell, the humpback whale, and Luna, the deep sea anglerfish. Okay, so I haven't asked you this question before, Sherry, but what, which one is your favorite animal of the ones that
Yeah,
we
of
did?
those 5, I like something about each one. I have a favorite thing about each one, but I guess if I had to pick one, it would probably be our mimic octopus, Dexter, because I mean, octopuses are fascinating anyway. Genetically, they're very not very different from a clam. They're in that same phylum of mollusca, and yet they're brilliant animals. They can solve puzzles. They can change the color of their skin instantaneously to match their background, change the texture so they can blend in. But a mimic octopus goes even farther. So, what Dexter the mimic octopus can do is observe other creatures that are out there, and then he will take the shape of another animal and the swimming pattern of that animal so he can either hide from a potential predator or scare off something that he wants to go away. So he will look around and see a banded sea snake, which is a striped snake, and then he will stick himself in the sand, stick out just a couple of his tentacles, make that striped color, and then swim like a sea snake, which is fabulous. How can he do that? And then the next moment he can change and become a flat flounder fish. So you can see that picture. There he is as a flounder, and there he is as a lionfish. And so it's amazing that these guys have the mental capacity, the physical ability to change their shape, change their texture, change their color, and then behave like something else. It just is astounding to me, and at on a whim. And how do they know? How do they know which animal is one that's going to scare off others? How do they know which animal is going to blend into the background? So that's one of my favorites. Do you have a favorite one?
Yes, it is the peacock mantis shrimp. Because
Oh,
look at this thing. I mean,
look
he
at that
is
face.
so cute and he's like a little pouty. He's like his
Yes.
face has a little grumpy pout, which we tied into the story. We're like, this guy looks mean. He has a super fast punch. His eye is the most complex eye. I mean, God, like some creatures, I mean, every creature's amazing, right?
Right.
But what was God thinking when he's like, let me make him the colors of a rainbow,
Look at
give
that
him a
guy.
complex eye with a punch that's faster than the speed of, is it the speed of light or speed
Sound.
of sound?
Speed of
Speed of
sound is
sound
so you there's actually like a sonic boom that creates when this guy
and a
punches
flash
and
of
a
light.
flash of light. Yeah.
So
So
it's just
fast.
and the illustrations of this book turned out so amazing. I just love them.
Yes.
But so we were in the Atlanta aquarium and I'm cruising along, and we've been to lots of aquariums. Our kids love aquariums. And there was a peacock mantis shrimp. I did try to do a video I sent to you. You're like, what are you sending me? I was like fangirling like it was my favorite singer there. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a peacock mantis shrimp. I'm like so excited. This crowd is gathering around. Like, cause I'm like going crazy and trying to like film him. I'm like, look at this, guys, come here, look at this. And literally a crowd was like coming around to see
Like,
what I
what
was
is
looking
this?
at. And it was a
Yes.
peacock because I know they don't do well. I mean, you have to like really have very strong glass walls because they can, which is kind of in our story, but
Yes.
they can punch their way out of it. But and he was so bright and colorful, and I did not get a good photo or a video of it. It was really
Oh,
hard because he like saw me and like he's grumpy, so he like went and hid behind the little rock. But
they are little grumpy guys. That's right.
there's little grumpy guys.
But they're also superpower. I mean, they're like the superheroes. They have super sight, they have super speed, they have super punch. It's like he's the superhero of the ocean too. It's fascinating that that little guy can do so much, and they're super colorful because they can view colors we don't even have names for.
Hmm.
It's fascinating. The outside the realm of what our eyes can see. They have so many colorful cones, and that enables them to see things in ways we can't even imagine. So super sight. Fabulous.
And it's so fun that God took. So for me, I started writing as a homeschool mom. I would just kids are napping, or I'd have a little break here, or they'd be dropped off at co-op, and I have some time and get some writing done. And you're, doing science stuff, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna homeschool. Like he still like those dreams didn't die, and he resurrect those dreams and those talents that we have, and we
Mm.
smash them together.
Yes.
And we were able to create this book, and the amazing illustrator, and then the team behind it, the editors, and it's just art designers. It's like God uses all of our talents and gifts
That's
for
right.
his glory. And then to sit down with my grandkids and start reading them the stories, and they're learning about
Right.
God and creation. It's just amazing.
Right, because we also will talk about after the story is completed, we have some sections, a deep sea dive that talks about some unique things about these creatures, understanding, explaining a little bit more, and then what does this mean for you as a reader? And so, like, I love when we talk about this one is for the mantis shrimp. God doesn't judge us by how big or strong we look. He looks at how we are inside. And then there's questions for kids to answer, to think about, or parents and kids to talk about. The peacock mantis shrimp is small but mighty in the ocean. Can you think of a time when you felt small but discovered hidden strengths? God often uses the least likely people to do
Mm.
great things with our hidden strengths. And what a great takeaway from the story of these creatures. And so we have that for each one of the 5 chapters, the 5 animals in this book. And I love that because it makes it richer, it makes it more memorable. And again, through story, we can start thinking about and talking about that. So I love how we've taken what's in our hearts, you and me, and put these things together. And it's just a beautifully designed book, and we're just excited to share it. It's so fun.
Yeah, and it's something that families can enjoy together. You could read out loud, or having your older kids read out loud to your younger ones, grandmoms,
Yes.
granddads can read out loud to grandkids. It's so fun to be able to see that this is a book the whole family can enjoy. And my husband, I got a copy, and he was sitting there, and I was just showing him, and he started reading, and he likes those like bathroom reader type of fact books. And he's just sitting there because I was trying to talk to him. He goes, "Hold on, let me finish reading this." I'm like,
Yes.
okay, yeah, but like
That's
it's we could just all enjoy it. And then
right.
I love how, um, you know, that God again could bring our talents together. And I think one of the things that's hard is the homeschooling moms, and you probably felt the season two where you're like, I just feel like I'm just serving other people. But I think it's
Yes.
important, first of all, we do serve, but also in little ways to use the talents and the gifts that God gives us, because it's a good example for our kids that God gave us talents and gifts, and we're stepping out, even if it's small steps during different seasons in our lives. But God will use those things for his glory. I mean, that's one of the best things. So, what encouragement, as we're wrapping up, Sherry, would you like to give parents or grandparents or aunts or whoever, of how they can use their unique gifts and talents that God gave them as examples to the younger generation?
Yeah, I would suggest that you first ask the Lord to show you um what are the areas he's given you that you love to do. Ask people around you who are close to you. Have you noticed any areas that what do I like to do? What do I do? What do I spend my time? Or think about if you had a free day besides maybe sleeping, which is something I would have done back in those days. What would you like to do with your time? And ask the Lord to show you ways that you can start developing those loves. Again, for me, I just loved science. I loved learning, and so I started I would teach co-ops, science classes. I would read more about that. I wrote small excerpts and small things that were little curriculum lessons and things. So, and it fed me because I loved diving
Mhm.
into that. And so, and again, I didn't think I could write because I had this mental block that said you're not good at writing because you didn't get a good education. Little did I know that God was working that in me. And so, and also keep an eye out. What is he doing right now? Where are you right now? Where does he have you? And ask him to show you what he can teach you right now where you are. If you have infants at home, littles, toddlers, infants, are you learning perseverance? Are you learning organization? Are you learning to have peace in a time of chaos? There are things we can learn. Are there younger moms in your area that you can be encouraging? Are there single moms, single women that you can talk to? Um, Ask God to show you because those things may not seem connected right now, but everything I mean, God knows your plan. He has
Yeah.
this plan for your life. And so he is getting you in front of these places to give you the experiences, give you the character building opportunities and the skills that he will use down the future. And so I know when I first started having children, the technology to do what I'm doing now wasn't even in existence. So
Right.
that's I couldn't say, well, I'm going to eventually be doing this because I didn't even know that this was available.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
true.
can't really necessarily say this is the plan, but we can say God has that plan, and He's going to use us in our broken way to make whatever beautiful picture He has for our lives. And I love the image of a mosaic. Um, Mosaics are beautiful. The tiles that are in different shapes, and they put them together and
Yes.
make this gorgeous. But the tiles are broken to be able to be placed together like that. And
Mm.
so we there's this beautiful spiritual vision that broken me, God's going to use that to make this beautiful mosaic. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to be faithful and do the next step today and the next step tomorrow and keep that wherever that thing is that I love. Add a little bit of that in your day when you can. Be creative to find those moments, to whether it's reading or crafting or just calling a friend and encouraging, to take those moments so that you can continue to be engaged and seeing where God's got the next thing that opens up.
Oh, I love that so much, Sherry. I just have just enjoyed getting to know you and
Mm.
love your heart, and I love working on this, and hopefully we can do more soon. But
Yes,
where can people
yes.
go just to find more information about you and to connect with you?
You can go to my website, sherryseligson.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Sherri Seligson author, Sherri Seligson, I mean, it's just my first and last name, Instagram, YouTube. I'm all over those places. So I'd love
Yeah.
to connect with anybody who has questions.
Yeah, and we will put all those links in the show notes. But thank you, Sherry, for being here today.
Thank you, Tricia. It's been so fun doing this project with you and just getting to know you more. I just love what you do and encouraging others as well.
Yeah, and Sherry and I would love if you go and check out Wonders of the Ocean Realm. I think your family will enjoy it.
Yes.